The key stuck a little in the old iron lock, grinding with age as he turned it. After a moment, it gave with a click that echoed louder than expected in the silence of the woods. Elias' heart stepped inside, expecting the hollow echo of an empty cabin. What he got instead was the subtle shift of wood above him like a footstep, a slow one, then another. He froze halfway through the doorway, fingers still gripping the key. The realtor had promised it was vacant, that no one had lived here in decades. Just a rustic retreat, she'd said. Dusty, sure, but all yours. But there were voices upstairs, whispered, almost melodic. Not scared, not surprised, like they knew he was coming. He eased the door shut behind him, instinctively lowering his stance like a man stalking game. The floor creaked beneath his boots. Dust hung in sunbeams cutting through the window panes. Cobwebs draped the corners, but there were signs of recent life, 3 mismatched cups on the table, a faint floral smell lingering in the air. The smell didn't belong to an abandoned place. It smelled alive. Elias had driven 14 hours from Arizona for this. A half-rotted inheritance tied up in land disputes and strange clauses. The deed was real. The signatures had checked out. The attorney had shrugged and said, "Congratulations, you now own a 100-year-old cabin in the middle of nowhere, along with 12 acres of nothing." But as he stood in the center of the main room, surrounded by furniture that looked too well kept to be forgotten, he felt the strange sensation of being watched. Not in danger, just observed. A staircase creaked. He turned slowly, and then they came down. The first woman appeared at the landing, and for a moment he thought the ceiling had shrunk. But no, it was her. She was massive. At least 7 feet tall, maybe more, with legs like sculpted marble and arms that looked carved rather than grown. Her skin was tan, sun-kissed and glowing, and her dark hair hung in a long, glossy braid down to her hips. She didn't look surprised to see him. She looked pleased. Another followed, then the third. All equally towering, equally stunning. Each had their own shade, one pale with silver blonde hair and ice blue eyes, one freckled with wild red curls and a smirk that dared him to speak. Their feet made no sound on the wooden stairs. Their presence filled the entire room. Elias couldn't move. "You're finally here," said the first one, her voice low and warm like something poured from a bottle. "We were starting to think you weren't coming." He opened his mouth, then closed it. I think there's been some mistake," he managed. "I just inherited this place. I didn't know anyone else was—" "We know who you are," the redhead interrupted, leaning against the banister with lazy strength. "You're Elias Hart, your grandfather's blood. And now, this place is yours." "We've been waiting," said the blonde. "A long time." "For what?" Elias asked. The first woman's smile widened. "For you." Elias didn't realize he was stepping backward until his heel tapped against the doorframe. The instinct to run flared, but something in their eyes rooted him where he stood. These weren't women who stumbled onto the property. They belonged to it. And by the way they watched him like a recipe was unfolding in front of them, he suspected they believed he belonged to them too. "Look, I don't know what kind of squatter's situation this is," Elias started, his voice steadying. "But this is my land now. The deed's in my name. If you want to talk about arrangements or whatever." The blonde let out a light laugh, but it wasn't cruel. It was amused. "You think we're squatters? Ain't that what this looks like?" He shot back, more defensive than he meant to sound. The redhead descended the final stair and moved past her sisters, walking straight into his space with that same unhurried confidence. Her body moved like it had never known self-doubt, like every inch of her was exactly how she was meant to be. She looked down at him not by choice, just by physics, and tilted her head with a grin. "We were born here," she said. "Bred here, if you want to be technical. And we've never left." "That's not possible," Elias muttered. "This place has been empty for 17 years, the dark-haired one said from the stairs, finishing his sentence. "Since your grandfather passed." That stopped him cold. He hadn't told anyone about that detail. Not the realtor, not the attorney. His fingers twitched near the pocket where the folded deed still rested. "You didn't expect us," the blonde said softly, descending at last. "But we expected you. Elias Hart, grandson of William Hart, last in the line." "What line?" he asked, voice low. "The one that always returns," the redhead said, circling him like a slow-moving star. "Eventually, there was a hunger in their eyes, but not the kind he was used to seeing. It wasn't lust exactly. It was ritualistic, like something old, like they had been prepared for him the way soil prepares for rain. He should have felt threatened. Instead, some strange part of him, the part that hadn't spoken since childhood, felt like it had just been welcomed home. "What are your names?" he asked almost against his will. "Silva," said the blonde, stepping forward now. "The oldest, Briar," the redhead offered, sliding beside him, shoulder brushing his. "And I'm Mira," said the dark-haired one from the top of the stairs. "The youngest." "Why are you all so tall?" he asked, half joking, trying to shake off the unease. Silva smiled. "Because we were grown, not just raised." "Grown for what?" he whispered. This time, all three of them spoke in eerie unison. "For you." The silence that followed their strange chorus was heavier than any words. Elias stared at them, three colossal women who spoke like oracles and moved like they'd rehearsed this meeting 1,000 times in their dreams. He wanted to laugh, to call it crazy, but something about their certainty was terrifyingly convincing. These weren't delusions. This was ritual. This was expectation. "I don't know what kind of game this is," Elias said, clearing his throat and stepping back into the dusty beam of light slicing through the main window. "But I came here to get away from people, fix up the place, maybe raise some goats, not—" he gestured vaguely toward their combined presence. "Not whatever this island. We're not a game," Mira said, descending the stairs with the precision of a trained dancer. "And neither is the pact." "What pact?" Elias asked, though he already hated that he had to ask. He could feel the weight of it in the air, like the truth was waiting for permission to reveal itself. Silva nodded toward the fireplace, where an old chest sat tucked behind a stone ledge. "Your grandfather left it. For you. It's locked, but you have the key." Elias stared at them, then at the chest. The key in his pocket, the antique one that had come taped to the deed, suddenly felt heavier. Reluctantly, he pulled it out. It slid into the lock with a soft click, like it had been waiting all along. Inside was a leather-bound book, wrapped in a faded silk cloth. Beneath it, a folded parchment sealed with red wax. His fingers hesitated over the seal. "You'll want to read that," Briar said gently. "It explains us." He broke the seal, expecting nonsense. Instead, he found a page in his grandfather's unmistakable handwriting. "To my grandson, Elias Hart, if you're reading this, the pact has reached its final cycle. You are the 9th Hart son to inherit the cabin and the first in over 2 generations to come alone. That matters. You'll learn why. 3 women live on the land. They are to be respected, protected, and ultimately, joined. I can't explain everything in this letter, only this. They are untouched, by design, and they are yours, by promise." His blood ran cold. "What the hell is this?" he muttered, reading it again to be sure. "There's more," Mira said softly. "Read the book." He unwrapped the silk and opened the book. Inside were entries, pages and pages of handwritten notes in multiple hands. His grandfather, his great-uncle, even some from names he didn't recognize. All of them spoke of the women. Always 3. Always 7 feet tall. Always virgins. Always waiting. The last entry was his grandfather's. "The pact must be fulfilled. The bloodline depends on it. You'll understand in time." Elias shut the book, heart pounding. "You expect me to believe my grandfather arranged you?" "No," Silva said. "Not arranged. Honored. We're not here because of him. We're here because of the vow." Briar stepped closer now, eyes locked on his. "We've never been touched, Elias. Not by anyone. We were raised for one man. The right man. And whether you like it or not, you are that man." Mira finished, her voice barely above a whisper. Elias didn't speak for a long moment. The fire crackled in the hearth, despite no one lighting it. The room seemed to breathe with them, him, and these 3 impossibly poised women who claimed their virginity like it was sacred inheritance. Not purity as prudence, but as preparation. Not something withheld, but something preserved. And for what? For him? "This is insane," he finally muttered, setting the book down carefully on the edge of the chest. "People don't do this. This is cult behavior. This is kidnapping or grooming or something worse." "We understand your reaction," Silva said calmly, taking a slow seat in the high-backed chair near the window. The beams above her head groaned like they still weren't used to her size. "But it's not what you think. This wasn't arranged for your pleasure. It was arranged for your blood." Elias stiffened. "My blood? You've read half the story," Briar said, dragging her fingers along the mantel like she was touching a memory. "Let us show you the rest." Mira reached into a side drawer and pulled out another document, this one far older than the others. She carried it carefully, reverently, and placed it on the table. The parchment was stained with time, the ink slightly faded but still legible. Elias leaned over it slowly. At the top was a family seal he recognized. The heart sigil, 3 interlocked pine trees beneath a crescent moon. Below it were words in Latin, which Mira translated softly as he read. He who inherits the land must inherit the vow. He who breaks the vow, breaks the blood. This is a generational pact, Mira said, her eyes locked on his. It goes back centuries. Far before this land. The women were always chosen. The heartmen were always called. Chosen for what? Elias asked again, feeling like he'd already lost the ground under his feet. To bear fruit, Silva said. But not alone. Our role is not to be used, it's to complete a bond. A harvest only comes when all things are in balance. Male and female, body and land, flesh and oath. It sounded like poetry, but Elias couldn't ignore the rising unease in his stomach. And what if I don't accept it? He asked, folding his arms tightly across his chest. What if I walk out that door and never look back? Briar stepped in front of it. Not menacing, just standing, blocking. You could try, she said, but the road would turn on itself. The forest would bend. You'd find yourself back at the gate before the sun even sets. One, you're saying I'm trapped. No, Silva said. We're saying you've been chosen. And choices have weight. Elias stared at the parchment. The lines that claimed his blood was tied to land and legacy and flesh. It sounded impossible, but then again, so did 3 7-foot virgins speaking prophecy and opening sealed documents in a forgotten cabin. What happens if I stay? He asked, voice low. Silva stood again, taller than him by nearly a foot. Her presence filled the room. Then the fruit ripens, and the pact is fulfilled. The words hung between them, heavy and ripe, like summer air just before the first crack of thunder. Elias stood motionless, staring at Silva. Her expression wasn't seductive, it was resolute. Like someone who'd rehearsed this moment in silence for years, knowing one day the right man would finally ask the right question. And now, he had. Why me? Elias asked. Why not someone else? Why not just live your lives like normal people? Silva tilted her head, amused but patient. Because we're not normal, and neither are you. Briar crossed the room in a few long strides, plucked the family book from the chest, and flipped to a page marked by a thin blue ribbon. You think you're just a man who inherited a fixer-upper, she said, tapping the yellowed paper. But you're not. You're the last heart of the 9th line. And that means something. Something ancient. Mira stepped closer, holding up a hand-stitched cloth she'd taken from the same drawer. On it was an embroidered tree, its roots deep, twisting into human shapes. Beneath it, stitched in the same thread, were the words, "One man completes the harvest. One blood feeds the root." Elias exhaled slowly, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Okay, let's pretend I believe all of this for a second. What does completing the harvest actually mean? Silva stepped toward him. It means you settle here. You take your place. You live with us, not above us, not behind us, but with us. You help work the land. You share in the covenant. And, in time, you take what's been promised. He flinched. Promised? Our bodies, Briar said plainly, her voice smooth as syrup. Not as reward, as ritual, as balance. We were raised for this, Mira added softly. Every year, every season. We were prepared not just to bear children, but to bear the weight of this union. Elias backed up until he hit the wall. And what if I don't want that kind of union? Then nothing happens, Silva said simply. No one forces you. The earth goes quiet again. The line ends with you. And the forest begins reclaiming what remains. It didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like mourning. He scanned their faces. Mira looked at him like someone studying the sky for a sign. Briar's gaze held challenge, like she dared him to admit he felt the pull too. Silva's eyes, calm and commanding, held something deeper than expectation. Hope. And what exactly is this place? Elias asked finally, voice low. Why does the land matter so much? Because this cabin sits on the last seedbed, Silva replied. Our ancestors buried it here beneath the floorboards, beneath the soil. And it only grows when the pact is whole. When man and woman join not in lust, but in purpose. Elias stared at the floor, then up at the timbered ceiling. The silence wasn't awkward anymore. It was sacred, like something inside him had just shifted and he didn't know whether it was fate, madness, or both. You think I was always meant to arrive here? He asked. Briar stepped closer. We don't think. Mira smiled. We know. Elias didn't sleep that night. Not really. He lay on the narrow bed upstairs, his grandfather's, they said, staring at the ceiling while moonlight poured in through the old glass panes. Every creak in the wood felt like breath. Every gust of wind outside the cabin felt like the forest inhaling. The women had gone quiet after their last words, vanishing to their separate rooms with no further explanation. No touch, no pressure. They had simply left him alone with their truth. He'd tried to rationalize it. Maybe they were raised in some off-grid community with twisted traditions. Maybe this was some psychological trick, some elaborate scheme to trap a desperate man into compliance. But then he remembered Mira's eyes, how they shimmered in the dark like she'd waited years just to be seen. He remembered the warmth in Silva's voice, the way she spoke, not like someone offering seduction, but salvation. And Briar, damn Briar, had looked at him like he was the one being evaluated, like she held the choice, not him. When the sun rose, Elias threw his duffel over his shoulder and headed straight for the front door. The forest greeted him with silence. He found the old dirt road that had brought him here the day before, still marked by the wheel tracks of his truck. He followed it for nearly a mile before the trees started to shift. Not in the supernatural sense, not at first, but subtly. The trail veered where it hadn't veered before. A boulder that should have been on the right was now on the left. The air changed temperature. And then, just as he turned the bend where he swore his truck had been parked, he found himself staring at the cabin again exactly as it was, morning light hitting its face like it had never slept. He stood motionless. His footprints were still fresh on the porch. "You can't run from what's buried in your bones," Silva said from the doorway, arms crossed, eyes gentle. "I didn't come here to be part of some prophecy," Elias muttered. "I came here to escape, to live quiet, alone." Silva stepped down from the porch slowly. Her bare feet touched the earth like it was something sacred. "Then why does every part of you keep answering us, even when your mouth says no?" He shook his head, frustrated, angry. "Because you've built a fairy tale around a man who's not interested in playing prince." "We didn't build anything," Mira said, appearing from the side of the cabin, carrying a small woven basket filled with ripe fruit. "This has been growing long before you were born." Briar emerged last, her hair wild and sunlit, her arms smeared with soil. "You think this is about romance? You think we want candlelight and vows?" She stepped toward him. "We want what was promised, not because we're desperate but because it's ours. You don't have to want us. But if you want this land, this legacy, you will have to understand us." Elias looked between them, the forest, the cabin, and the sky. He had never believed in fate, but something about this didn't feel like fate. It felt like design, and he was starting to suspect he was never the one in control. The air inside the cabin was warmer than it should have been. Not uncomfortable, just intimate. The kind of warmth that made your skin remember things it shouldn't. Elias sat at the long wooden table, the same one where the three women had first addressed him like a prophecy with a pulse. Now it was set with food, not store-bought, not canned. Fresh bread, berries, root vegetables roasted in a cast-iron pan, eggs that steamed with the scent of thyme. Mira brought the last dish from the hearth and set it down gently. "Eat," she said simply. "You haven't." He didn't argue. The first bite hit his tongue with the kind of familiarity that had no explanation. It was the taste of something homemade, but deeper than that, like a memory cooked into each mouthful. Mira sat across from him without a word, watching him eat with soft eyes, her fingers folded around a mug of something that smelled of mint and wood smoke. "I don't understand," Elias said between bites. "You could have just told me the truth up front." "We did," she replied gently. "You just thought it was a test. I still think it might be." She smiled at that, not denying it. Moments later, Silva entered through the back door, sweat on her brow, arms glistening, carrying a bucket of spring water. She poured him a cup, placed it in front of him, and looked him over like a farmer inspects weather. "You came back. I never left," he muttered. "You tried," Briar said, stepping in behind him. She smelled like cedar and Sunday, but trying doesn't mean anything out here. Out here, what's meant stays. Elias looked at each of them, their faces no longer just beautiful or strange, they were becoming known, and it scared him. "You think I want this," he said. "But you don't know me." "We don't need to," Silva said. "Your blood walked this land before you knew it existed. The fruit doesn't ask if the sun wants to ripen it, it just does." He leaned back in his chair, staring up at the ceiling. "And what if I told you I still don't believe any of this? The contract, the ritual, the pact. What if I just want to be a man fixing a broken house in the woods?" "Then eat," Mira said. "Rest. Stay as long as you like. And if I touch one of you," he asked suddenly, the words leaving his mouth before he could stop them. "What happens then? Is that part of the ritual too?" Silva walked behind him slowly and placed a hand on his shoulder. Her touch wasn't seductive, it was grounding, heavy, real. "If you touch us," she said softly, "you won't be punished. But you will feel everything we've been holding back. Everything that's been waiting." He turned to look at her, but Briar was already leaning in, her freckled hand brushing his jaw. "We're not just ripe, Elias. We're overflowing." Mira reached across the table and placed her palm over his heart. "You think this is forbidden," she whispered. "But what's forbidden is pretending you don't feel it too." The parchment spread across the table looked like it had been pressed between centuries. Thick, yellowed vellum, stitched at the edges, and sealed with a darkened wax crest identical to the one on the old deed he carried in his coat. Mira had placed it down with quiet reverence, as though unveiling scripture. Elias stared at it without touching. "This is the original," Silva said, standing behind him. "Before lawyers, before county clerks, before anyone tried to tame this place with modern words." Elias glanced over the looping calligraphy. It was beautiful, deliberate, written with the kind of certainty that had vanished from the world long ago. His name wasn't on it, not exactly, but the line it mentioned was his. "To the 9th son of the Hart bloodline. When the season turns and the field has lain untouched for 9 cycles, the harvest shall begin." "There's no legal power in this," he murmured, though his voice lacked conviction. "No court in the world would honor it," Mira agreed, her voice soft. "But the land does. The forest does. We do." Briar folded her arms. "And so do you, whether you want to admit it or not." Elias looked down at his hands, calloused, practical. The hands of someone who had always lived by logic, not legacy. And yet those hands now trembled above a piece of paper that felt heavier than steel. "What happens if I sign it?" he asked. "You don't sign it," Silva said. "You live it." She leaned down beside him, pulling back a corner of the parchment to reveal a symbol burned into the table beneath 3 interlocking rings, each one engraved with a single name: Silva, Briar, Mira. In the center, a blank space. His eyes locked on it. "The harvest isn't just about planting," Mira said. "It's about balance. You bring the 4th ring. Without it, nothing blooms." "Is that what this is to you?" Elias asked, rising from the chair. "A bloom, a body for a body, a man for a season?" "No," Silva said, stepping in front of him. "It's about roots. Deeper than flesh." Briar added, "You were never chosen for your body, Elias. You were chosen for your presence, your steadiness, your ability to stay when others leave. Your blood may have brought you here, but your heart decides if you remain." He looked at each of them again. Silva, towering and strong, her voice always the first, but never unkind. Briar, fire and edge, always pushing but never cruel. Mira, soft-spoken and steady, her gaze like gravity itself. They didn't just want him. They needed him to complete something bigger than desire, bigger than family, a covenant, a restoration, a harvest. "And if I agree?" he asked quietly. "What does that make me?" Mira stepped forward, lifting his hand and placing it over the final ring carved in the table. Her palm rested gently over his. "It makes you ours," she whispered. "And us, yours." The night didn't come quietly. It arrived like a slow exhale, the sky melting into indigo while the forest whispered through the cabin's open windows. Elias stood in the doorway, staring out at the trees. Behind him, the low hum of voices drifted from the hearth. Mira, humming a tune he didn't recognize but somehow knew. Briar, chopping vegetables with swift, confident rhythm. Silva, sharpening a blade not as threat but ritual, as if preparing for something sacred. He had spent his life avoiding entanglements. Every past relationship had ended the same way. Him retreating, them asking why he always kept a part of himself locked away. But now, in this impossible place with these impossible women, he felt seen in a way that had nothing to do with words. Their eyes didn't just look at him, they understood him. Not the version he performed, the one he'd buried. He turned from the door. Silva met him in the center of the room, her silhouette a monument in the firelight. She didn't reach for him. She waited, letting him cross the space between them, one breath at a time. "Are you afraid?" she asked. "I'd be an idiot not to be," he said, voice low. She smiled not with victory, but with relief. "Then you're ready." Mira joined them first, her hands still damp from rinsing herbs. She stood on his left, her presence soft and grounding. Briar came last, circling behind him like wind before a storm. Her touch came first, fingers brushing the back of his neck, slow and deliberate. He didn't flinch. "We're not here to overwhelm you," Mira said gently. "We're here to welcome you." You still haven't told me everything, he said. What does ripe mean? Silva nodded toward the carved ring on the table, the space where his hand had rested earlier. Ripe, she said, means full. Full of what's been kept in. Full of what's been denied. Full of possibility, of purpose, of hunger, not just flesh, but spirit. Ripe means ready, Briar murmured near his ear. Not just for you. For us. For all of it. They were close now. Not pressing against him, but surrounding him. Like a current. Like a storm system of warmth and gravity. Mira's fingers laced with his, slow and respectful. Briar's hand pressed to his chest, feeling the steady rhythm that betrayed how shaken he really was. And Silva stepped close enough that their foreheads nearly touched. You still think this is about lust? She whispered. I don't know what island. It's a return, she said. To the body, to the land, to yourself. The fire behind them dimmed to a slow ember. The scent of lavender and soil filled the air. And something shifted in Elias, not lust, not panic, but permission. Permission to let go of the idea that life had to follow a script, that love had to be linear, that purpose had to come with clarity. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them, he whispered, "Then let it begin." Their bodies moved like breath, no rush, no agenda. Just presence, just surrender. Not to them, but with them. What they had offered wasn't possession, it was union, and Elias understood now. Ripe had never been about desire. It was about readiness to belong, to bloom, to be more than a man running from ghosts. It was time to plant something that could finally grow.